we're going to be looking at the two different techniques that we'll use and kind of like the texture maps that are associated with them to give a little bit more context. So we are going to be starting off with kind of like an old gen asset. So this is going to be the first demo that I'll be doing as well. So that's what we'll start with. So back in the days when 3D first started, a lot of the games were made with just a diffuse texture. So there was nothing else. You would have just your low poly, and then you would kind of do the textures on top of it, kind of like paint the textures in Photoshop, and then apply it to your low poly, and then you would have your assets. You would have your game asset. That's very old gen, and a lot of people still use that technique today because it has a really kind of like a nice crafty look to it. So it's very retro. It looks awesome. So once it's done well, it really looks good, and it's perfect for mobile games because it's very it's not demanding for the game engines because there aren't that many maps. So it's just a diffuse texture to render. So it's very, very simple, very light. So and that's what it was used before because everything was a little bit weaker, so it needed to be simple. So diffuse. So this is what we'll be doing for the first demo. So it's going to be a diffuse only on a low poly. But if you're looking at old gen, so the old gen, like PlayStation 3, for example, what it was using is actually all these maps. So you'll have here the diffuse, and then on top of that, you'll have the specular map and the normal map, and then sometimes, if needed, the emissive map for glowy bits, that kind of stuff. So the three main ones are diffuse, specular, and normal. So that's what was used in for like the last generation of game assets. So those are very, very common, and in the scope of the tutorial, what I'll be doing when I actually create a character, I'll be baking all those different maps. So you'll have the normal map and then diffuse, and then you can easily create the specular by just kind of like adjusting your diffuse map a little bit. So we'll be creating all of these maps as well, and I'll show you kind of like what they look like. But those are all it's all like older stuff. A lot of the mobile games use those maps currently. So pretty common stuff for mobile now. The main reason why they're not used for current gen, so for like a PlayStation 4, that kind of stuff, is because the specular map here is you're kind of like faking how the light react on surfaces, and when you fake something, it's just sometimes it breaks, it doesn't work as intended. So now what we have for current gen is something like this. So those are all the maps for current gen assets. So the most common maps, so kind of like the basics. Of course, you could have some more depending on like your shader and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is what is used. So when we are going to work in Substance Painter, those are the maps that are going to be generated, exported at least. So once we're done in Substance Painter and we export the map, so this is what's gonna come out of it. So you have your diffuse map, which is most commonly known now as the albedo map, and then you still have the normal maps. Normal map, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And then the main difference here is going to be, so as you can see here, you still have the emissive. The emissive map is still alive and well, and the difference here is those three here. So those are what we are replacing the old school specular maps. So this is going to be the maps that you need to have physically accurate kind of like light interaction with your model. So especially these two here. So metallic map and the roughness map. So what they are basically is the roughness map is your reflective map, so your reflectivity map. So it will tell light to reflect or not on your model. So for example, if you had like a mirror surface, you would have roughness at 100% because it's reflecting the light from its environment completely. And if you had something that is like a matte, like a matte color, you would have roughness at 0 because none of the light from the environment is reflected to the viewer. So, and then of course you have anything in between. So like plastics, for example, might be like 50% roughness or something like that, where they reflect a little bit of the environment, but not all of it, so that it doesn't look like it's just like a mirror surface or something, or like a water surface. Like water would be 100% for most of the time. So that's pretty much it for roughness. That is the reflectivity index of your shader. And then metallic is how metallic the surface looks like. So this is a little bit more abstract, a little bit harder to understand than roughness. But essentially, for something that's not metallic at all, so like a plastic, you will have in this case, a black value. And for something that needs to look like metal, it will be white. And then everything in between, kind of like different levels of metalness. So. For example, in this case, like chrome would be 100% roughness and 100% metallic, and like a black matte would be 0% metallic and 0% roughness. So and then as you can see, you can create, with a combination of those two, you can create any kind of material. So that's why it's used now. And then on top of that, you also have the ambient occlusion map. And this tells the light to not go into certain areas. So, all the little cracks here, everything that's black, basically, it tells the light to not reflect back from there, as it would behave, if it was real. So that's what that map does. And so while this is what is, technically exported out of the, the texturing software, you don't plug these directly into the the shaders once you're in like Marmoset Viewer or Unreal Engine, for example. So for performance, sake, since all of these here, as you can see, they're all just grayscale, right? There's no colors, and channels also happen to be grayscale. So red, blue, and green. So what we do is we merge all these maps that are just alphas into this one map here that is called the occlusion roughness metallic map. And it's basically just you put the occlusion here and you replace it with the red channel, and then you take the roughness map, you replace it with the green channel, and you take the metallic map and you replace it with the blue channel, and you get kind of like this funky looking map. But you still have all the information from all the different maps stored in each of the different channels. So this is what you would plug into the game engine. So as you can see here, it's much fewer maps, which is great. So you have the diffuse, the normal map, the emissive map, and then this one that contains the three other ones. So that's what you would plug into Marmoset Viewer. And that's exactly what we are going to be doing on the later chapters. So there you have it. So those are the two techniques and the two kind of like workflows that we'll be using. So those are the results that we'll be getting. So we'll have these maps for current gen PBR assets, and this map along with these the specular, normal, and emissive for old gen assets that we are also going to be looking at. So there you go. So next, to put all of that into even better context, we're going to be working on the demos. So I'll walk you guys through all the different steps that go into creating the two different types of 3D assets. All right, so here we are. So what we'll be doing now is work on two different meshes and kind of take them through the entire pipeline. So to mimic basically what we'll be doing later with the character models that we'll be doing. So the first thing that we'll be doing here is the hand-painted version. So obviously what I'll be doing now is way overkill for the kind of meshes that we'll be doing. So I'm just going to do like a simple box. So obviously I'm not going to need all the tools that I'll be using. I could just do this in Maya and Photoshop, basically, so that would be enough. But instead, for this first one here, I'm going to start in ZBrush, because in ZBrush I'll be able to add some details to my box. And then I'll take that into Topogon and do a quick topology and baking, and then take it into. And before that, I'll do the UVs in Maya. Import that mesh into Topogun, and then do the baking in there, and we'll finish it off with Photoshop and 3D code. So for this first one, so here we go. So we're gonna start off with a cube. So cube. So the first thing we want to do here is make it a polymesh 3D, and we are going to go ahead and subdivide it. So I'm going to remove smooth for the first one, smooth back. All right, so now we get nice soft edges for our cube. And let's see what we can do with this. So it's a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to do a bunch of mask selections. This. All right, and that's going to be the extent of our details with this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and smooth the mask. So you just click and you just hold Control and click on the mask itself and invert it. And I'll go ahead into deformation. And let's see, inflate negative maybe. Yeah, inflate a little bit like this. All right. There we go. So that's our high poly. So beautiful. And I'll do another subdivide on this. Clean it up a little bit. And then I'm gonna delete that. And we are going to obviously not stop here. I'm going to decimate this. So I want to have fewer polygons for this. Right now I have 500,000 active points, which is about 1 million polygons, which is way too many for something this simple. So for my models, generally speaking, when I do characters, like complex characters, going to be anywhere between like 10 to 40 million polygons. So the end result, what I want when I export it out of ZBrush, is about 10% of that. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So 10% of whatever it is I'm working with. And the reasoning is just that the other programs that come after that, the other software, they can't handle as many polygons as ZBrush, and so that's why. So I am going to go ahead and pre-process the current tool, current subtool. We only have one anyways. It's going to do its thing. All right, so the pre-processing is done. So I'm going to turn on here the topology view, so that we can see the wireframe, so that we can see the what it actually does when we decimate it. So I'm going to decimate. Okay. There we go. So as you can see here, it's a lot, like very, very reduced compared to this. And if I turn this off and we just look at the shape, and when I switch between back and forth between the two, there's absolutely no difference. So yeah, we have much fewer polygons for the same result. So that's the beauty of decimation. So what I am going to do now is export this. I'm going to say cube high. And then we're going to go into Maya. I'm going to import that into Maya. Because no need really to do any like topology for this, because it's just a box. So I'm going to go here and load up my Handpainted. All right, so there it is. So as you can see, it's a little bit laggy because it's pretty high poly right now. It's, like I said, double what it was saying. So it's 100,000. So I'm on my laptop now, so it's struggling a little bit, which is why I imagine if it was 1 million. So what we want now is to create the low poly for that. So it's going to be just a simple box, nothing too complicated. So create cube. So whatever software you're using right now, you can do exactly the same thing. So you're gonna create a cube that's about the same size, kind of kind of like wrapping your high poly as if it was a box for your high poly. And then with this, I might. No, I'm gonna leave it like that. So we're gonna keep it super simple. And what I want to do next, now that I have my my topology basically done. So imagine if I did the topogon pass before, what I would do is I would build a cube like this, and that would be it, right? So now I can just do it in my UTS. So this is my UV editor, and you can see here it's already been unwrapped. So it unwrapped it like a box, which is good. And yeah, we are not really going to optimize this. I think maybe. No, it's fine as it is. So one thing that I might want to do is subdivide this a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to split that down the middle. Something on the other side. This. So the only reason I'm doing this is because I'll try to do like some tiling maybe with the texture to see what's possible. But yeah, that's it. Normally, it would be no really good reason for it to be divided like this. But in this case, let's see. Let's try to do something interesting with the texture. So all right, so that would be it. So my UVs are done. Now what I'm going to do is select that mesh that we just created. I'm going to export it as an OBJ, and I'll call it cube low. All right, so now we go into topogon. I'm going to load up my ref, which is the high poly, cube high, and load up my scene, which is the low poly, cube low. All right, there we go. So we have some artifact going on here. We'll see once it bakes, if it actually bakes it in, but we can always clean this up. It's not much. So let's try to go into the baking here. We'll go generate maps, and let's see the settings here. So I'll go with a 1K by 1K map, so that's fine. I'll set the sampling to medium. Search distance. Sure, that's all fine. Side. So this is how far it'll search for details. So for high poly details on both sides of the cage. So the black thing that you see here is the cage. Everything here looks pretty good. What I want here is to generate normal map. And generate ambient occlusion out of this. No color map, no cavity map, no need for all these. So don't check those. And hardware ambient occlusion. I'll generate both, see what's the difference. Alright, so highlight. Sure. Alright, then it's going to save it. I want this to be saved on the desktop for access. So we're just going to go ahead and try to generate that and see what happens. So that should be done already. It's a very, very simple mesh. So I see. So software AO map is a little bit messed up, so we're not going to use that. So instead, we'll use this one here.
It seems pretty well. And then, yeah, so it did grab all the details, but those artifacts definitely do show up. So we'll clean that up. It's no big deal. There we go. Okay, so this is the normal map for the box. So yeah, that's what we are going to be using. So the only reason why I have this here, again, we're doing a hand painted version, so I don't need the normals for this. But the reason I did the normals is just to get some extra lighting information, like some extra highlights for the edges of the details. So it's just a trick to get kind of like a good base when you're working with just hand painted textures. Because if you're gonna go ahead and just start with the cube, the cube as it is, kind of like in here, and start painting on this, it's a little bit more tricky because there's nothing there. There's no reference. There's no lighting information or anything like that. What we'll start with once we're done with that is a cube with all the kind of like the details already, at least all the gray, black and white details already kind of already there. So all we'll have to do is add a little bit of colors and add some damage and highlights here and there, and we'll be done. So that's the reason why. So if you don't have these two things here, if you don't go through these steps, well, you have to just manually paint all of that in. And of course you can do that, but I think it's a little bit faster with this. All right, so what I'll be doing here is first I want to clean this up because it's a little bit too dirty. So what I'm going to do is just manually just paint it and soften it when needed. So I'm going to go ahead and paint and try to get the same kind of color. Like a soft brush. And of course, for stuff that's a little bit more advanced, and when the problem's a little bit too hard to fix with just by just painting, you can always adjust your baking settings to get a better bake. In this case, the problem was with my my high poly, so it was already a little bit too low. And when you have really flat faces like with a cube, you tend to get a little bit more artifacts when you not dynamesh, when you decimate. So here it really doesn't matter. It can be a little bit dirty. Because this is going to be turned into a just a black and white map, and we're not going to actually use it for the normals because there's no normals for this character for this first step. It's just going to be hand painted details, so it really doesn't need to be that dirty. Okay. So almost done with this. That should be fine. All clean. There we go. Save that. And then we're going to do the same kind of pass with this ambient occlusion version. Maybe those black. Those black spots. Drop the tone a little bit. And we are almost done with this. So the next step is going to be transforming the normal map into a black and white map, as I said. And the way to do this is I have a script that I'll be including, of course, with the tutorial. And what it does, it just takes the normal map and does everything on its own. So it's pretty awesome. There we go. So that's clean enough. And we're going to roll with that. And one thing I might want to do in here is lighten it up a little bit, but it's not all completely black. So that's good. Okay, so now that we have the normal map here, what we want to do is once we loaded the actions, the action script, you can just drag it in here. But we have all the different things here that we can do here, and the one that we want is fake Crazy Bump, and you can also just download Crazy Bump, which is an app that does that. But instead, I have it as an action in here, so all you press is F11, and you might have to invert the normals. So let's go ahead and do that. So yeah, in this case, what you want to see here is in the creases, you want it to be darker. So in this case, I have some highlights here that shouldn't be there. So we are going to undo all of that. Okay, and I am going to go into the channels here, select the green one, and Control I to invert it. And now we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and again, press F12. And now we're talking. So you can see here, everything looks good. So in the little cracks here, we have black, and then on the edges we have highlights. So that's good. Exactly what we want. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And then we're going to bring it into this folder, which is this file here is going to be our main file. I'm going to paste that on top. And I'm going to set it to hard light. There we go. So before, after. So you can see you get some nice detail information here. Since we're not going to get a normal map, this is really nice to have. So I'm actually going to duplicate that. We're going to make it a little bit more obvious. There we go. All right, so that's pretty good. Yeah, that's a very, very nice start. And yeah, so we'll start with this basically. So now that, so as you can see here, this is the top of the box, everything that's in white. This is the bottom, and here those are the sides. So we can even add a little bit of actually no, we're going to stop here as far as the grayscale. Now the only thing that I want to do now, because this is kind of boring, so I'll create a gradient map on top of all this so that we have a little bit of colors to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and select create a new gradient map. To have something interesting to start with. So we'll be doing kind of like, I don't know, like a metallic box. So I'm going to go ahead and select like metallic colors. Like this, and then center. Here. And another one here. So I want to just try to get like some rich colors going on, like a nice rich gradient. Because the more I do here, the less I have to do once I'm in 3D code. I'm starting to look pretty nice. And the shades here. Maybe go for a complementary color. Tone the highlights down a little bit. Okay, so yeah, let's start with that. So of course, if you you could definitely go ahead and start painting details in here. That was the kind of like the old school way of doing it. But now we have great tools like 3D Coat, where you can actually paint on the model in 3D, which is a lot better because you can actually see the final result as you're painting it. So we're going to go ahead and save that. This is going to be our color map. I'm just going to save it as JPEG. Color. Actually, no, I'll save it as a TIFF. File with no compression. And discard layers. All right, now we're going to jump into 3D Coat. And when we load this up, all we want to do is first import our mesh. So we're going to be painting UVs on the mapped mesh. So this is what we want to do. So we go browse for cube below. So in here, yes, it's going to be 1K by 1K as we said. Everything good. Don't need to change anything. Right? So this is what we have. And now we are going to be importing our texture. So it's going to be just a single poly texture. So that's what we'll go ahead and select our color map in here, and there we go. So there you have it. So now I am going to hide. Go. And see how we have now something that is a lot nicer to start with, as opposed to just a plain gray box. So now at least we can start painting because we have some lighting information already on here, which is nice. So yeah, the tools. I mean, the tools in 3D Code very, very simple. So we just have kind of like layers here with the different blend modes, just like in Photoshop. And that's why I like it, because it's very, very similar to Photoshop. And there's a lot of tools here that we don't need. All we'll do is go with the paint brushes here. And I use super, super simple paint brushes. So nothing crazy. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and paint on here. So I want to make sure first that we have symmetry turned on. So now we see the symmetry plane, which is this little yellow thing here. The yellow line. So our symmetry is activated in this direction. So whatever I draw on here, I'll draw on the other side as well. And what I want to do is to not add depth to this. So depth opacity is going to be at 0 for this layer. So all we'll do is just paint the color. Now we can go ahead and close that. And yeah, the color picker is right here. Wherever you're pointing, you can just press V and it'll color pick that color. You can see here the color is changing while I'm pressing V. And yeah, we can just start painting on this. So Let's add some highlights on the edges. And one thing that we want to do also is remove the light in our scene, because right now, so we're going to go and select flat shade. There we go. So this is going to be the final product. So, if everything that you see now is the end result. So that's why it's pretty nice. So we can just add scratches and highlights on the edges here. Should have symmetry on the other side too, but and what's great with this, when it's flat shaded, is that you don't see the edges too much. So before, you can see the clear definition, but here you can fake everything, so it looks like a smooth shade, but it's just a cube. It's just very little faces, but it still looks nice. It still looks high poly. What's cool with this technique is that it's very painterly. So if you're coming from a painter's background, this is really good on like first step into 3D, because a lot of the same stuff applies. Yeah, there you go. So that's kind of like that's kind of the process. And I'm gonna add a little bit more stuff in here. Like some scratches, some damage to that box. Of course, if you don't want the damage to be symmetrical because it might not look that great, you can remove symmetry. Fake it like this. The color is changing now because I'm pressing V to select new color. There you go, some fake damage here. Then you can go ahead and click and drag your brush so that's a little bit bigger, and then we can add some more damage in here. So maybe a little bit more brownish. Now, of course, right now, like I'm just painting on a base layer, but if you want, just like in Photoshop, you can create new layers, and then you can have that layer set to like overlay maybe. That's if you want to paint some even more like some highlights on top of your base layer, like this. It's a little bit overkill, and then you can always change the opacity of your brush. And then you press Shift, and then you paint to soften everything. It's a lot, like the process with this is just paint, soften, paint, soften. And now I'm going to activate symmetry. This way too. And we're going to select a new layer. Put right here. The layer is going to be set to multiply, just like in Photoshop. Brush it out. There we go. Make kind of like the lower portion of the box a little bit darker as if it was dirtier. And then there we go, guys. So now I'll do just one last thing with this. Is just I want those different sections here to be a little bit darker. So I could do this in here, but what I like to do for something like this, where you can just do it with selection, is I like to go and texture export into a color. So you can also export all your layers. So everything that you have in here with their respective color blend mode will be exported as is too. So that's really good if you want to do a lot of back and forth with Photoshop. But in my case, I'm pretty much done in here. So what I'll do is just export a flat texture. So I'll call it color done. And now I can go back in Photoshop in here. And so this is, I always like to keep this file here, just in case I need to go back and do something. Close this one. I don't need it anymore. And load up the color map. Done. There we go. So that would be our new texture, our new color diffuse map for this asset. And as I said here, what I want to do is, one more thing that I forgot that I always do is I want to keep the wireframe for this box in Photoshop so that I know where my islands, my UV islands end. So what I do in here is you go into your UV editor, UV snapshot. So image, UV snapshot. You want it to match whatever texture size you're working with. So 1024 in my case. I'm going to export that into the desktop. UVs, enter, and hit OK. So now I can go back in here and import my UVs. It's saved it as .iff, whatever format that is. There we go. I'm set that to multiply, and here you are. So now I have, kind of like I know where my box is, right? So everything else is just useless. What I can do here to darken those boxes, go into selection mode. There's this. All those little rectangles that I want to be darker. Oops. All right. Same thing on the other side. All right, so what I'll do now is call that UVs. And on a new layer, I'll just have I'll have it set to multiply. And then I'll just do something like this. And then drop the opacity, that's not too much. Maybe change the color a little bit. Something like this. All right, and I'm going to save that. Just save it over the, I think that's target, right? Color done. I'm going to save it over the one that's already there, and I'm going to import that back in here. So I can just get rid of my layers at this point because I've already exported it. So go ahead, import color done. There we go. So now I have my the darker areas. And that would be it for my assets. So of course I could spend a lot more time on this, but for the sake of this, now you see the entire process. So the character later on is going to be the same process, except a lot more complicated. And but yeah, so there you go. And one more thing that I wanted to show you too is since all of this stuff is split now, you could easily play around with this. So let's say you had very, very limited texture space and you wanted all the faces to have kind of like the same texture or something. You could easily go in here and start chopping this up, right? So let's see, this cut. All this is going to be cut. All right, so what I could do now is select this island here and move it around. So actually, I'm going to get rid of the high poly in the scene because we don't need it anymore. Go away. All right, so now I have just my cube, and I'm going to apply the texture in here so I can see it. And this is by no means important. It's just something that I wanted to show you. If you're doing environments, this is something that you would use a lot more, playing around with tiling and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and import a texture into this guy. So I'll get rid of the history, levered color, load up my color file. Color's done. Flat lighting. There we go. Right now, it just we considered it as a just regular kind of prop. But if you were working on an environment and this was kind of like a wall or like a wall section or something like that, of course, right now we didn't do our texture based on that, but the kind of stuff that you can do here is pretty cool. Like you can do a bunch of stuff. So you could select this face here, which is the face on this side here. And kind of put it somewhere else to create something different. So instead, if we don't want those kind of like vertical lines here, we can just grab side here, and then get rid of it by moving the UVs. There you go. This is the kind of stuff that you can do once you have those split up, and then you can split those up even further. So if I split these here, and select everything at the bottom, I can change the design again completely. So for environment artists, this is it's always kind of like this big puzzle of how to create textures that will tile nicely depending on how you tile them, and where to have your cuts in your walls and stuff like that. So for environments, of course, most of it is like if you're talking about walls, it's just planes. So you wanna keep it as low res as possible, but by having like smart cuts, and probably I have too many right now, but anyways. By having like different cuts here along like certain seams or certain details, allows you to do some pretty crazy stuff with your textures if you optimize them. If you have like a really good texture sheet, really with like a bunch of trim details, like wall details, rug textures, like metal textures, and then you can just have a bunch of things tiling differently. Your UVs will look like a complete mess once you're done, but it's the beauty of it. Like with very, very little texture space, you can create a lot of you can have a lot of details by having things that tile and I reuse the same texture over and over again. So anyways, I'm starting to ramble. So this is going to be it for this this little box here. There we go. So we created a box and it's hand painted. So there you go. So possibilities are endless, and we'll see what we can do with this once we move on to the character. But now let's jump to the PBR version.